Welcome to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks, a show that provides extraordinary insights for product managers who want to go faster and farther in their product management careers.
Hello, this is JJ Rory, Vice President at Sequent Learning Networks. In our Masters of Product Management podcast, we tap into experiences of people who work in and around product management to help you learn and grow in your product management career. I am often asked what qualities and characteristics differentiate the great product manager from the average product manager. And while that's a complex question with many nuances, generally my answer is a combination of innate curiosity, a good balance of being both strategic and tactical, intuition, and empathy. We're going to be talking about that last one on today's episode, empathy. Empathy is a critical ingredient in successful product management. It affords us the ability, as best as possible, to get in the shoes of our users and customers. It helps us feel their pain, celebrate their wins, and feel a deep sense of commitment to help them solve their problems and be successful. I've yet to meet a great product manager that didn't have a strong sense of empathy. But empathy is also one of those things that it's not easily defined or at least concretely described in context. Our guest today is here to share her experience with the evolution of user empathy and how she's been able to incorporate empathy building initiatives in her team and reap the benefit of those initiatives. Ashley Wali is a startup veteran with experience growing teams and companies from tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. She is currently VP of Product at Discuss.io, a B2B video conferencing and insights platform for online market research and user interviews. Ashley's background includes time both in-house and consulting for e-commerce startups and as a consultant for the federal government. In a former life, she was a competitive figure skater, and in a future life, she'll be a novelist. By the way, I apologize for all future guests, but Ashley, the figure skater, has now taken the all-time crown as coolest guest. Ashley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
And by the way, I definitely want to do a whole other episode on your figure skating career. That's fascinating to me.
It was a lot of fun.
Okay, I can't wait to learn more. Okay, but on to other topics. So as I've said earlier, empathy is such a critical aspect of product management. And I personally would argue one of the most important. Can you set the stage for us in terms of your take on empathy and what it means in the context of product management?
Sure. So the official definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And while we talk about it a lot in product management these days, it's actually a relatively new concept. It was just kind of brought into fashion in about the last 100 years or so. So recent scientific studies have shown us that it's a pretty crucial differentiator between humans and other animals, but we're still figuring out exactly how it fits into our lives and how it can impact our ability to connect with other people. So on a more personal level, how does it fit in for product teams? Well, it's my belief that you can't build good solutions for problems you don't understand. So at the heart of being successful as a product manager is understanding and sharing the feelings of your users. So in a very practical sense, this means putting aside your assumptions and your agenda and really focusing on listening and watching to what real people are doing and saying. And I saw a phrase in a research group that I'm part of that has sort of stuck with me in the last few days. They said, design like you think you're right and listen like you think you're wrong. And I think that really goes into the heart of empathy, of coming into the situation, leaving behind everything that you think you know, and trying to really get into the heart and mind of your user.
That's fascinating. Actually, you said a couple of things that were very impactful to me. So I'm going to repeat both of those just so that the audience gets them again. Number one, you can't build good solutions for problems you don't truly understand, which is so true and so critical. And I love that last one. Design like you think you're right. Listen like you think you're wrong. Wow, if we can incorporate that into everything we do, wouldn't that be great? So empathy is something that's sometimes thought of as a quote unquote soft skill or even a squishy topic in some circles. I think most people think they're empathetic, but it's sometimes difficult for product managers to know if we're being empathetic. Any words on how we know if we're incorporating empathy into our PM activities?
I find that PMs are typically pretty comfortable with quantitative data because it's clean, right? And it tells a neat story. But to get to empathy, we really have to get underneath the quant data to understand the why. And it's in that qualitative data where empathy lives. So I think product managers can be equipped with the information they need if they're willing to put aside, again, those assumptions. So, say you're looking at app traffic patterns and you see a spike in late afternoon hours, but the conversion rate on that traffic is particularly low. You might find in talking to real users that that's because the users are browsing your product catalog while they're commuting home. And maybe they're only partly paying attention because they have to keep track of their belongings and they have to make sure they don't miss their stop. Or maybe they're browsing out of boredom rather than a real intent to buy something. They could also be concerned about putting in payment information on public transit. So if your team is able to come into a conversation really willing to understand what is happening that creates the quantitative data you have, then they're equipped with the information they need to maybe increase conversion if that's their goal. So they could come at it by, streamlining mobile payments so it's more comfortable to purchase without having to reveal personal information. Or maybe they would nudge you to buy one particular item rather than dumping you into a full catalog. So to me, you know that you're incorporating empathy into your decisions when you're keeping the user's goals and context in mind when you're making decisions. So if that goal is let's increase conversion during these hours of the day, maybe we're not trying to increase the number of people coming into the funnel at that point, but we're really looking for why are we not converting on the traffic that we already have? And that to me is when you really know that empathy has taken hold.
Right. Very interesting. And that actually leads me to my next question. So we, as you've mentioned, we product managers and product leaders, we've gotten much better at gathering data on customers from product usage data, web analytics, voice of customer sessions, et cetera. But have we lost the human aspect of our customers in all this quant data? Do you have a position on that?
I really feel that in many instances, we have lost that real understanding of who the customer is. So we work with companies every day who are wanting to get closer to their customers. And we see that empathy in companies goes something like, we need to learn about our users. So they start to gather a lot of quant data. We're looking at web analytics, purchase behavior, NPS, social data, the big data aspects of the world. And so then they go, okay, great. Now we've got the demographics and we understand what's happening. But it turns out in many instances, that's still not enough information to be able to make good decisions. So then that's when they really start turning into the empathy and they say, oh, okay, let's go meet some real people. And that stage can last years, especially as they mature in it and start to layer it in with the quantitative data so that you get a full kind of picture of this. So, there's a wonderful TED Talk by a woman named Trisha Wang, and she is credited with popularizing the term thick data. So she worked for Nokia in 2009 in China, and she had done extensive field work with low-income people. And she was seeing them swept up in this desire to have smartphones, even though it was costing them a significant amount of money to get one, like 2 months of salary. So she went back to Nokia and recommended that they create an affordable smartphone and unlock the Chinese market. But her ideas didn't fit with the big data that they were collecting and the analysis that they were doing on it. So they dismissed the idea of a smartphone. And we all know that Nokia is no longer an important player in the mobile phone space. And it's that kind of dismissing of qualitative data, partly because you're not talking to as many people. Right? In the Nokia case, it's like they had millions of data points of quantitative data, and Trisha Wang had 100 interviews, and her deep knowledge of low-income people working, with street carts and things in China. So it's sometimes hard to give the same weight to those types of research and that type of understanding. But if we don't layer them together, I think we really do miss an important aspect of the motivations behind what our users are doing. And more personally, we see this in our clients as well. So one of our clients mentioned that they had more data on their customers than ever before, and yet they had never felt more disconnected from them. So that's why they came to us. And we found that when you try to distill an entire population segment into a persona document, you miss the nuances that drive the decision making and the emotional responses to your product. And I think that's just so important to help you understand how to identify and solve the problems that your users are really facing.
Yeah, that's great examples. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with you. I think we've gotten so good at the data side of things. While certainly not optimized yet, we've gone too far to that side of the spectrum. We used to only rely on intuition and qualitative data. Now we have all this quant data, and I think we've missed a little bit of that good balance. So thank you for sharing that. So because empathy is something most people assume they already have, that can make it a hard sell for a product manager trying to introduce this type of research in their organization. Do you have any tips for people wanting to establish an empathy building initiative in their company?
Yes, empathy programs can be a hard sell because they take time and the sample sizes are small, and there may not be an immediate action to take out of one of the conversations you have. So, what you're really doing and what you're selling to your senior management is that you're investing in honing your product intuition by getting to know your users better. So that's going to prepare you to innovate and stay in front of user needs. So that's how I would position it when people start to question, well, what's the payback and the ROI on investing in these kinds of interviews? For B2B product managers, I think it can be especially hard to get this kind of program going because it can be hard to get time with your users. Working professionals are busy, and you don't always want to ask too much of the relationship. And in some instances, you may not even have permission to contact your actual users. So for B2B product managers in particular, how I coach them through setting up this kind of program is first to find your users. If you have permission to talk to your actual users, wonderful, start there. But if you don't, or if you're working on a new market, find where your users are online. So this could be reaching out to people on LinkedIn and just, asking for a call or asking them out for coffee if they're local. Another thing that I see suggested a lot amongst research communities is to go on Reddit and find a subreddit that has a high overlap of, interest or topic with the type of person that you want to talk to. Another thing you can do is use some online panels. So there's a number of those. Respondent.io is one, and one that we use frequently. But for more difficult or international recruiting, you can use a service like ours. There's other ones online as well that can connect you with users around the world. And then lastly, I would say if you're looking for where your users are, look on social media. Look who's tweeting about relevant hashtags to the type of conversations that you want to have with people. And then once you've gotten in front of your users, to really drive this home internally, you have to share out your results. That's so important to let people in the organization know what you've learned. So if you have a catchy soundbite that you can share to defend a product decision, it can really help people change the conversation from here's what I think we should do to here's what the user is asking for, or here's how the user responded to this idea. And it takes a lot of the emotion and opinion out of it, frankly. So lastly, if someone is asking you to justify the amount of time or the amount of money that you're spending on an empathy program, I would say to ballpark the amount of time that you spend in discovery and design for a feature that was developed as part of your empathy program or while you've incorporated your empathy interviews versus before you did that. And see, just to keep yourself honest of, does this really help us develop faster? Because that's what we believe it's going to do. It's going to help us deliver faster and deliver the right thing with fewer iterations. So, and then lastly, you can measure the success of the adoption of those features that you've developed in conjunction with having interviews and see, did we get to the right answer faster than we used to?
That's great. And very good, tangible ways to try to find that value, improve that value, because as we know, as product managers, we're constantly trying to not only improve our value to the external customers, but our internal stakeholders as well. So thanks for that. So building on that, what are some concrete, tangible ways you found that improves and sustains, for that matter, empathy within your product team?
We have found that it's really important to share it around and make sure that everyone in the product design and research orgs in particular have conversations with real users, but we also try and expand that to include engineering and our senior leadership whenever possible. So that both takes the pressure off of someone having to have lots of continual conversations with users, and it helps drive home some of those messages to people. And it really is important to hear those things firsthand as opposed to just hearing the summary report afterward. So we find that spreading around the responsibility and the honor, frankly, of talking with our users has gone a long way to making it a sustainable effort within our team. And we also like to start with the people who are most different from ourselves. So we go for the hard to find ones because they're the ones that are going to challenge us the most. It's kind of easy, when you think you're your user, to make decisions about your product. But when you recognize, hey, this person or this use case is very different from the way that I've been thinking about the product, or I'm just not the user, it's really important to start with those first so you can make sure that you are creating the best solution for the problems that they are bringing to you. And lastly, we just make it a habit. You have to do it on a regular basis so that the hype is gone and it becomes something that you're not nervous about doing. I find that when we're nervous and we're wondering how to manage the conversation, we miss important things like nonverbal cues. We don't pay as much attention to the setting that we're in. And those things can give you really meaningful ideas and insights. So it's important to make it a habit and to do the research and the conversations, even when you think you don't have anything to ask about, because that's when you're actually just getting to know someone on a human level and kind of marinating in their life for a little while.
Great. Have you seen any results from these efforts?
We have, but one of the reasons that I think an empathy initiative can be hard to sell internally is because it's hard to quantify the payback. How do you measure how much empathy you've built with users, right? There isn't an empathy meter that you can measure yourself against. So we find that incorporating empathy into our product development process does shorten the time to get to the right design. And one of our clients who does physical product development has estimated that they get new products to market an entire quarter faster than they did before they started interviewing users. But again, these are sort of estimates. It's hard to measure this sort of thing. For ourselves, we found that we're more confident with our designs and we make fewer changes after launch, which is obviously when it's most costly. So it is allowing us to both develop products that meet the needs right now, while we're also looking forward for what's coming and what the next challenge is that our users are going to face. So for me, it's a little bit more intangible, but it is helping me feel like we're on the right path and we're going in the right direction. We're anticipating the needs of our customers. And of course, the product adoption and the growth of the company is really what sets that, apart and tells you if you're on the right track there.
Right. It sounds like, well, you did actually illustrate some tangible results and benefits there. There also has to be the right expectations, right? As you talked about before and just now, the expectations of what success means is important, right? And the internal folks have to have that grasp of what it means to have an empathetic product management team. So any final words of wisdom for the product managers and leaders out there who may be struggling with this topic and with empathy fatigue, if you will?
To me, user empathy is a journey, but it's not one the product team should take alone. I think for empathy to really take hold throughout a company, the information and the learnings have to be shared. So I would say to make sure that you're not internalizing what you've heard and failing to bring that back to the rest of the organization, particularly the engineers and the senior leadership, to make sure that the whole company is joining you on this journey. Because when everybody has user empathy, everybody is able to better predict where the company should focus, where the product should go, and how you can anticipate the needs and the wants of your customers to ultimately move things forward. So I would say just make sure that it's something that is being communicated out and that you take the company along with you on what you learn.
Well, this has been just a great discussion. Empathy is so imperative to successful product management. So thank you, Ashley Wali, for helping us think about this in a different way and sharing your wisdom and advice with us. I certainly have found some nuggets here that will help me think about this ever important topic. Thanks again for joining me, Ashley.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for joining us on Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. I am JJ Rory, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Masters of Product Management, powered by Sequent Learning Networks. If you'd like to take your career to the next level with additional tools, training, coaching, and books, be sure to visit Sequent Learning Networks at sequentlearning.com.